Nicole, I'm going to give you a thumbs up in just a second once we are ready to rock and roll. And then feel free to start. You can introduce and then kind of just let the audience know who you are, what we're doing, that this is day 4.
Okay.
And then just jump into basically introducing the tribe and start the first question.
Okay.
I'm going to turn the AC off just so we don't
Los
have
nombres de
noise.
ustedes. Bunkwanimaku. Bunkwanimaku y recoger.
Rogelio.
Rogelio.
Sí. Lo que quiere decir, presentar de dónde vengo, de dónde soy.
Well, hello. It is day 4 of RegenWeek, and we are thrilled to be here with 2 representatives of the Arhuaco tribe of Colombia. We have Bunkwanimaku and Rogelio, and we will be diving into themes of regeneration and what that means to the Arhuaco people and their cosmovision. So, ¿querías presentarte?
En primer lugar, darle un saludo. Vengo de la Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, tribu Arhuaco, y de un capital de pueblo arhuaco que se llama Nabusimaque, y mi nombre es Bunkwanimaku, el nombre original, y mi cédula dice Emilio Chaparro.
Muchas gracias a todos. Mi nombre es Rogelio Torres. Vengo en representación de la cultura y del pueblo de la sierra, en representación de la voz del bosque, en representación de la voz del agua y de la naturaleza. Venimos aquí a compartir y a traer un mensaje de la sierra.
We are very honored, as Rogelia said, to receive these voices of the forest, of the water, of nature, and we will be very pleased to receive what you have to share. Entonces, la regeneración, hablamos de la regeneración, que es un tema nuevo para la cultura occidental, pero es algo muy profunda ya en la cultura indígena. Entonces queremos saber por qué definamos lo que es la regeneración, pero nosotros nos gustaría saber la definición para ustedes qué es regeneración. So, what is regeneration for a culture that has these principles already so entrenched? But for Western culture is something that we are just discovering.
En nuestra lengua original se dice Eiguande Duni, muy bien para presentarme. Nosotros somos nación verde, el mundo natural, que es dueño de la vida y la vida de la humanidad. Nosotros somos vivos, que nos mantenemos en ese mundo natural. Entonces la regeneración, vemos que ya lo que están degenerando al bosque, al mundo natural. Entonces se necesita reparar energéticamente con el código universal, primeramente, porque todos están afectados. Entonces nosotros estamos dispuestos, al menos donde están las naciones verdes que hacen parte del mundo natural. Entonces empecemos a acelerar las regenerativas, tanto en espiritual y en material.
Creo que el término regeneración viene adaptándose de un sistema de afuera, ¿no? Y creo que eso permite de que la gente tiene que volver a entender y volver a ver de que está haciendo un daño y está en la necesidad de hacer algo. Por eso se inventan el término regenerativo. Se inventan el lenguaje para poder hacer algo, pero ese hacer algo debe estar acompañado de una vida real. Y creo que el término regenerativo tiene dos elementos o dos pilares importantes para nosotros. Uno, desde la conexión energética y la vibración energética que tiene que darse. Más allá de poner a sembrar árbol, más allá de poner a decir que se va a cubrir un manglar, si no tiene vida, pues simplemente eso es un elemento artificial. Yo creo que el término regenerativo también hay que entender es cómo la naturaleza lo entiende, desde la practicidad. Entonces es importante mirar entre hacer y lo que la naturaleza le asiste. Es decir, cuando la naturaleza no está intervenida, hay más vida, hay más armonía y llueve más, hay más alimento, hay más abono, hay más bienestar, hay más pájaros. Pero cuando uno trata de hacer después de destruir, pues la vida no es lo mismo, porque el ciclo que lleva la naturaleza, la energía que lleva la naturaleza, la conexión que lleva la naturaleza se pierde. Entonces yo creo que el mundo hay que empezar a aterrizar y entender las dos lógicas. Uno, el ejercicio que hacen los pueblos indígenas en el mundo a nivel global, y uno, el enfoque que tiene todo ambientalista, toda sociedad que quiere aportar y hacer algo a este tema del cambio climático finalmente. Porque finalmente el tema de la regeneración es entrar a una conciencia de que se está haciendo un daño. Entonces hay la necesidad de hacer algo. Por eso hablamos de regenerar. Creo que es importante.
Yeah. In that sense, there's a couple of things to showcase from the way that they use words in Spanish to how that can affect us in English. For one, there's the word vida. And vida for them is like an energetic component compared to as we see it as life. In general, it's a vague concept. So something for us to discover more is how they use the word vita and what life really means, where that vita, that Latin seam, relates to what is now. To put what they said into a small sense, since our time here is short, on a more spiritual level, behind what is regeneration in the material plane, their understanding has a very in-depth aspect of what they call the universal codes, which are energetic structures and what they refer to as documents that exist. So first, on regeneration, for them, it's first to look at that before the physical plane. And that needs to be regenerated itself because of the works that have been done. As Rogelio explained, regeneration has been invented as a term because there has been destruction, where their understanding of the natural world and how it lives, how it is in harmony, doesn't need to be regenerated. So this is a new term that's coming up that's allowing this bridge to happen for our cultures to start really understanding what needs to be done in order to know what is regeneration. And firstly, there's the spiritual aspect, and then comes the physical aspect of having things in harmony, which brings more life, which is it's an energy force that goes through these structures. And that creates more trees, creates more birds, creates more insects, creates more compost, all those things. So there's two different aspects to focus on, the spiritual and energetic side, and then the material side, terminating in the fact that regeneration is being invented now because of the destructions that have come from our societies.
Well said. I was fascinated by this idea of the two pillars of the spiritual sense of regeneration and the physical sense of regeneration. And my natural curiosity goes to knowing or wanting to know how they see their role in regeneration in a degenerated world. Mi curiosidad se va directamente a saber cómo se ven sus roles y tal vez sus responsabilidades en un mundo degenerado y cómo se manifiesta en sus proyectos.
En nuestro proyecto regenerativo desde el Nación Verde es conservar lo que existe, porque ya lo que ha acabado necesitaríamos que la gente empiece como a concientizar desde el sistema, el mundo artificial, tener en cuenta con todos los materiales a defender, proteger, digamos, el mundo natural porque es dueño de la vida.
Sí, yo creo que nosotros como pueblos, más allá de ser arhuaco, nuestra función es asegurar la vida a perpetuidad. Y en ese sentido, nuestro trabajo es empezar a desarrollar un ejercicio de, por un lado, de traer el mensaje, de llevar este mensaje a la sociedad. Busquemos otra forma de vivir, busquemos una forma más coherente con la naturaleza, por un lado. Y por otro lado, necesitamos activar en esos puntos, lugares, espacios, cerros, montañas, que tiene conexión con la sierra, en la que necesita revitalizar, robustecer y activar la energía para que la naturaleza siga funcionando normal, siga lloviendo, siga los pájaros cantando normales. Porque finalmente nosotros somos parte de la naturaleza, somos un pedacito de la naturaleza. La naturaleza es finalmente el que hay que garantizarle la vida. El bienestar es a la naturaleza, esa es nuestra tarea. Entonces necesitamos asegurar estos corredores biológicos, universales, lagunas, montañas, que no sean intervenidas más allá de que el hombre quiera aprovechar y sacar beneficios monetarios. Entonces, esa es nuestra tarea, nuestro mensaje. Además, pues en la sierra también hacemos un ejercicio de recuperar montañas que están intervenidas, que están amenazadas, para que se regenere, para que se recupere, para que el bosque exista y también que las autoridades espirituales puedan hacer el ejercicio tradicional y cultural, social y ambiental, que cumpla la función ecológica los territorios. Esa es nuestra tarea.
I've enjoyed this idea that nature is the owner of life, el dueño de la vida. And I think it's appropriate now to understand your work with Sun Nation, because we have this collective task to turn away from the individualism that causes degeneration. And so my question is, how can we move collectively and support indigenous tribes, yourselves and others to accomplish this work? Entonces, mi pregunta siguiente es, obviamente tenemos una tarea de ver más al colectivo que al individuo y que podemos coordinar para alcanzar esa meta de regenerar y establecer la regeneración, un mundo regenerativo. Entonces, ¿cómo podemos, nosotros como cultura occidental y los demás, apoyar a los tribus indígenas para alcanzar esa meta?
Sí, porque nosotros como pueblos originarios venimos con ese códigos, con esa ley de origen del mundo natural, que es del universo, que es dueño de la vida. El ser humano no es dueño de la vida, sino dueño de la vida es lo que es natural, mundo natural. Y el planeta Tierra tiene un corazón, que es Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, que está constituido todas las montañas del mundo que están conectados tanto con las montañas del mar, que está al fondo, y otros, digamos, del países. Entonces, empecemos a conservar cómo podemos proteger en el corazón, porque ahí donde están la energía más débil del mundo, porque cuando empiezan a atacar en el cuerpo, o sea, el corazón, el cuerpo se debilita, entonces la mayoritaria empiecen como a pensar con el sistema que tienen, digamos, de tecnología, mirar en ese punto cómo podemos conservar, porque nosotros lo que cuidamos son universal, que la vida de la humanidad, y además es patrimonio de la humanidad, o sea, la Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, no solamente son intereses de los pueblos originarios, sino para todos. Entonces lo invitamos a toda la sociedad mayoritaria para conservar, en primer lugar, en el corazón, porque el corazón late por todos, porque Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta tiene 36 ríos, 618 arroyos, más de 200 lagunas y todos los climas, digamos, piso térmico, y lo que cuidamos es ese patrimonio de la vida que es la humanidad del mundo. Entonces lo invitamos a todos, de allí empezamos a conectar diferentes montañas del país. A eso venimos y tenemos esa responsabilidad, lo invitamos a todos los seres humanos mayoritarios para que empecemos a formar, no tanto informar.
¿Se puede comentar sobre el trabajo de la Nación del Sol? Y tenemos
Nación del Sol es porque el ser humano solamente mira donde se ve la luz, solamente donde pasa ilumina el sol. Entonces ahí empieza como solamente el mundo dice que no hay, debemos desarrollar, pero el mundo está bien desarrollado, está bien constituido, está bien reglamentado. Entonces que empiece a mirar con el rayo del sol cómo podemos proteger el mundo natural para que el mundo natural, Nación Verde, empiece a dar vidas, porque si empezamos a cuidar vidas es como cuidar nuestras vidas.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Creo que el gran mensaje es, uno, entrar en una reflexión de concientización, y el segundo escenario es empezar a proteger los territorios y la conservación de los bosques.
So our task going forward is to support people like Bung, Kwanimaktu, y Rogelio, and the tribes that they represent, to conserve the territories that they are stewards of, and to support projects like Sun Nation.
Perfect.
Welcome back to day 4 of Regen Week. We are here with Zoe Wild, an astrologer. Oh! Start over.
People do that. There's a Zoe Wild in Sedona, and people call me Zoe Wild. So. I'm wild also.
It just fits.
So it makes sense, yeah.
All right.
We can start over.
Yeah. Welcome back to day 4 of Regen Week. We are here with Zoe Wind, an astrologer, social architect, and visionary. So we're going to dive in to all of the ways that your work represents regeneration. So let's start off with what regeneration means to you, and when did you discover it?
Yeah, great question. So I first discovered it when I was in school at Northern Arizona University studying environmental science, sustainability, regenerative agriculture, and it was a lot of conceptual ideas of what is a whole system, how do we think, how do we solve these problems, but it was probably not until I left school and I went and lived on the land and was like, I just need to be a human. Like, I really need to understand what this means to observe nature, not to just read about it in a book, even though there was lots of hands-on things in college, it takes time. And so for me, regeneration is a whole systems approach to life in every way, seeing everything as having a part. Everything has a place, and we need to understand what that is, what its role is. How do we feed what is supportive to the system we want to grow? How do we let dissolve and die what wants to go? Because regeneration implies that cycles end and new cycles begin. So I could probably keep going, but that's it in a nutshell for me.
I hear the passion in your voice. That's excellent. And obviously, you studied it in your education, and now I want to know how you bring it to life, these principles of regeneration, which you seem very familiar with, into your work and into your life projects.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, first of all, 15 years doing permaculture and biodynamics and seeing nature, listening to the land, listening to what she wants, how the water wants to flow, where the elementals want to be honored. All of this is a big part of it. But then I moved that into, living in these communities and seeing where things were functioning, things were breaking down, we needed healing, we were trying to be cohesive. So I moved into doing soul work and found astrology through herbal medicine and alchemy. And so now I practice astrology in a regenerative way, which is to honor all the signs as a part of the whole. All 12 signs are within all of us. They're in every chart. So just because someone might be in Aries doesn't mean they don't have Leo in their chart. It's somewhere there, and we can expand into all aspects of our being. And also seeing, well, what's working? Where's the shadow? Where does that need to be transmuted so it can be functional? We might have stagnant water, stagnant emotions that need to be moved. We might have fire that's been pent up. We don't say the fire is bad or wrong or shouldn't be there. We just say, oh, we need to channel the fire. We need to circulate our energy. And so I I was initiated into a lineage called Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, and they're really working to update the archetypes so that certain archetypes aren't shamed. Like Scorpios are dark and intense, or Leos are always trying to hog the spotlight. But if we shift that and we transmute it, we're like, Leo is here to be a creator and to shine their light and to be a leader. And there's a healthy way to do that. Scorpio is here to help us look at what's uncomfortable, what's shadow, and transmute that into our greatest power. Just like we might say, oh, this plant is a weed. There's no use for this dandelion. I didn't want it here. And we could say, oh, actually, that's medicine, and it's pulling deep minerals up from the soil to regenerate the soil. So really framing life as everything has a place if I can just learn to seek to understand what it's trying to do, and then what can I do to support that in being healthy and regenerative for the whole system.
Yes. I really resonate with this idea of transforming the shadow and updating very esoteric practices to our modern life.
Yes.
Oof. So what I want to know next is, what kind of trends, because for those of you who aren't at RegenWeek, you didn't get to see Zoe Wind present about regenerative astrology. So we're gonna ask, what kind of trends as an astrologer do you see in this that are applicable to the regenerative movement? How about that?
Yeah, well, first of all, Uranus is in Taurus right now. So we're entering the age of Aquarius, and everyone's kind of aware of this, and it's not an overnight thing. It happens in a transition period of around 200 years. And Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius. So I've been following what he's doing, and he's currently in Taurus, which is the sign of Earth. It's fixed Earth. It's the most earthy systems. It's also where we get stuck, you know? So he's really shaking up how we relate to things like our values, our resources, how we build connection, and we share energetic resources, spiritual resources, emotional resources, all of these things. And so I love this trend of like such a beautiful time for permaculture, regenerative work that is pioneering us into new states of consciousness. And the other trend is that we're shifting and blending the age of Pisces with the age of Aquarius. And so Pisces is spirituality and empathy and compassion and oneness and quantum mechanics of what is the meaning of this reality. And now Aquarius is merging in, that's saying, well, technology and the mind, and how are we thinking about it? How are we talking about it? How are we taking what we've learned there and using that as fuel for our new endeavors? So we're really merging the heart and the mind at this time, to not abandon the heart for technology and to not abandon technology because it's scary to move forward and we're not sure how to integrate it. And so this trend is really, it's exciting for me, because if we do that, we can see a world where those things bridge in a way that creates more space, more time, more ease, more abundance, more efficient management and allocation of resources. So
All of it.
Those are a couple
all of it.
Yeah, we want all of it.
Well, awesome. So how can we, as regenerators, as change makers, what can we learn from your work in this field of regenerative astrology to inform our work in this movement that we're in?
Yeah, I mean, astrology is endlessly useful, in my opinion. Like, it speaks about everything. It is a whole systems theory. It is the language of the universe, and it's using as above, so below, so above, universal principles, hermetic laws, which is the same as our physical constants, or the constants of physics. So we're seeking to do that in all of our projects. Like, how do we create a community with organic chemistry and growth and allow for the decay of what needs to go? So astrologically, we can do many things. We can help the soul work. We can help people find their mission, their purpose, help them dial it in. There's a lot of validation that comes through astrology. Like, sometimes it's like, oh, I always, like, I'm doing this, but like, I know I'm supposed to do that, but it's a little uncomfortable, you know? And then you like I do a reading for someone, I'm like, you're definitely supposed to do that. And it's okay that it's uncomfortable. Like, let's step into that more and let's explore how you do that, because we have the birthing of new earth leadership, which is different from the old systems of leadership, of domination or needing to be alpha or needing to be, you know, invincibly superhuman, and instead to be vulnerable and from the heart and to bring people together and to be more collaborative. We can also look at timing, when to launch a program, when to sign your contracts, when to do your R&D, when to pause and reflect, and to really create a whole, I do Aquarian advisor work for people doing quarterly assessments of how to plan your whole project. We can also look at astrocartography. So say you want to purchase land. Where's this going to be successful for you as the space holder or the steward for that work? So those are just some of the ways.
Oh, those sound like really excellent tools, and I want to plug you into different regenerative communities that are being built, because this is, I feel like, one esoteric model of really communicating with the celestial world while we're building things in the physical world.
Oh my gosh,
that help
yes.
us be more regenerative. So
Yeah.
super, super fascinating. And actually being so passionate about regenerative communities, like how do you see this work that you're doing, how might it manifest learning to live in harmony more, for example?
Yeah. I mean, as within, so without, as without, so within. So having tools and understanding for who we are in our soul's evolution so we can show up and evolve and honor that each person is expressing their unique being. This is the age of Aquarius. Like, we want to make space for everyone to shine, and we also want to hold space for our own evolutionary process. One of the things that I'm really passionate about is the marriage of the heaven and earth. So the stars is a big part of Aquarian culture, the star card, the star being. We are remembering our origins as galactic as much as earthly. So there's been this beautiful revival of remembering who we are as humans on the earth, reconnecting, knowing that we are children of Gaia, but we are also children of the stars. And if you look at the ancient cultures, they built all of their temples in alignment with these stars, and they were channeling. And so we're like in this process of like, how do we get to higher consciousness? And they would literally be like, well, we're going to anchor Pleiadian energy and Syrian energy and Arcturian energy. And so I'm a big proponent of ceremonies, sacred sites, even building medicine wheels, and utilizing the solstices and equinoxes and the cross-quarter days of the year, because they link the Earth grid into the galactic grid. So we can literally channel and integrate regenerative energy flow with our entire galaxy, which is all evolving together as one organism, so to speak. So expanding our awareness in the Aquarian age to beyond even the planet, like we will become stewards of other planets as a species. How do we do that? How do we really balance that? And you can anchor powerful energies for your land, for your community, creating new ritual, new culture, new holy days in this time that bring us together, that we merge our consciousness, that we can manifest on the non-material as much as the material.
Wow, Zoe, you are very awake.
I'm still waking up a little bit, but thank you.
Any final words on, the spiritual journey of regeneration? Just something short and quick that you want to end on.
Yeah. For me, what's been coming through is that as we transition from Pisces, one of the biggest lessons as we come out of an era of religion taking our connection to source, dominating, dictating how we can relate to our own divinity. This is the time to be reclaiming that. And so for our spiritual journey to really be self-directed, to do the work to clear our channel, to find that connection, whether it's through being in nature or reading and learning or connecting with people. We'll all have our own natural way of doing that, but to really dedicate ourselves to truth coming from within so that we can show up and collaborate and co-create this world from that divinity that we each hold.
Yes, please. I reclaim it for you, me, and all of us.
Yes, me too.
Thank you, Zoe. Thank you so much for your presence and your energy and your words.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
What's up? We're here on day 4 of Regen Week, and we're here to party with purpose with Davis and Dylan. They are representatives of 2 amazing sponsors of Regen Week. We have Meta Creative, which they're going to tell us about, and Power, which we're going to also learn about in this interview. So let's start. Let's just dig into it. What does regeneration mean to each of you?
Yeah, for sure. I was doing a little meditating on this right before this interview, and I just thought that, keeping it simple, and for me, it's like simple actions that promote growth and reciprocity.
Well said.
Yeah, I mean, regeneration is to generate again, to planting seeds physically in the ground and also in our hearts and minds and in our lives. So, yeah, to recreate and to refresh and to generate new life and create a new way of being that's not based on old paradigms.
Let's do it. Let's do it together.
Yes, for sure.
Right on. So let's just dive right into your work, right? How does regenerative principles manifest in the work that you do?
Great question. So yeah, I mean, for Meta Creative, I'll start there. We started doing events about 7 years ago with the motto of Party with Purpose in college to raise awareness and excitement about environmental nonprofits and sustainable initiatives. So we would do trash cleanups and river cleanups and then parties afterwards, dance parties, and we'll do art activities and meaningful, engaging games and activities that would actually incentivize people to want to connect and make meaningful connections and remember the night instead of the alternative, which is so common in the mainstream and especially in colleges. So yeah, that's for the basis of what got into what helped start our events. Now we've turned into a community over time. We're helping with different farms and homesteads. We're doing permaculture design courses, eco festivals, and just giving back to the land while also giving to people by giving them actual experience, planting trees, building composting toilets, raised garden beds, learning about composting and things like that. So it's a beautiful mutual exchange where we'll do volunteer events on a farm, and there's just this beautiful harmony that happens.
In general, like weaving in principles of permaculture, indigenous earth skills into like the decisions that we make when we plan events and kind of make connections with people and bring them in. So making sure that like we're keeping in mind what are our like the inputs of like the resources that we're taking in and what are our like what is our yield looking like, as well as like what are the basically like byproducts of all the things that we do. Whether we do an event here, what is the waste that we're generating from these decisions that we're making in terms of like bringing on our certain partners or sponsors for the event.
Right on. It sounds like you guys are doing the very important work of making regeneration mainstream cool. So I salute that.
Yeah, sure.
I really want to know about, maybe describe a moment or a journey towards the realization of regeneration, how that really came to be important in your work, in your life, in your play.
Yeah, like that epiphany. Like I was just telling Davis, for me it really hit when during COVID, us and about 5 or 6 friends decided to move onto a permaculture farm together and get out of the city. And that was like this big jump start into like, okay, it's on. Like we need to figure out how to live with each other as well as work with the land. And we were fortunate enough to be able to help produce a PDC with the landowners that were there.
Permaculture design course.
Exactly, and really get a sense of like what are these practical things that like we need to do while living on land. So we all lived in tiny houses as well as some of the houses on land, and got to figure out really what are the actions and the mentalities around like keeping your tools from like rusting out in the rain at night, and making sure that your resources are being taken care of so that we don't have to replace these things because of how much energy it would take to kind of replace the things that we have. So these practical things that we got to just really live and do and show others and create content about was so exciting. And for us, that for me, that was definitely like my jumpstart into permaculture and regeneration that, got it going for me.
Yeah, yo. What about you, Davis?
Yeah, I was just gonna say also preserving those resources, canning. We got lots of food from the gardens, too much actually, so we're gifting it to the neighbors, use that as an opportunity to connect with our surroundings. But yeah, so I was fortunate enough to work for my family's energy efficiency company for over 15 years. And so on the East Coast US, I've worked for just about every renewable energy program and green energy, incentive funded program that exists. So LED lighting, energy efficient, anything, gas, water, electricity. And I'm a BPI certified energy auditor. That's my background. And so that kind of jump-started me into thinking about conservation and renewable energy. And now we're working with Power, which is the fastest growing renewable energy platform in the world. And it's fully transparent, fully cloud-based, and just really empowering people to start the process of renewable energy. So getting solar panels, getting a battery, if you want an EV or whatever that looks like. And eventually we're adding other adjacencies, that anything that consumes energy, we're going to be adding energy efficient appliances to that. So, but yeah, that's a lot of what actually funds our passion, our mission, which is MetaCreative, is having that background in renewable energy and now being fortunate enough to be involved in Power so early and helping thousands of families across the US and Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and eventually worldwide. We're expanding to other countries. So yes, that's a little bit of my background.
Yes, let's double click on Power for a second,
Yeah.
because I'm really curious, with deep experience that you have in the renewable energy field, what kind of trends are you seeing of like regeneration in that field? And then maybe a little bit about how Power is setting itself out, distinguishing itself in this kind of more sustainable field, right?
Yeah, I can just comment on that. So the past 20 years have been the solar coaster for anybody that has gotten solar at their house. It's been pretty deregulated and pretty crazy. A lot of people have been getting taken advantage of, which is very sad. But Power is really setting the trend for transparency. So every single cost is written right there. There's no hidden fees, there's no hidden costs. And we have every option possible, from financing to products to batteries. We have Tesla batteries, Enphase, SolarEdge. And this cloud-based model is the first of its kind. So in seeing trends, this is a big step forward in setting the trend for how solar and off-grid energy, renewable energy, should actually happen. And unfortunately, a lot of solar companies are going out of business at the moment. About 40% of solar companies across the nation in the US are going out of business or have gone out of business in the past year. So that's a big, big number. And Power continues to increase in everything. I mean, revenue, team size, and that's really because they have the mission forward and front. We're a benefit corporation, just like MetaCreative also. The founder of Power got the vision in a ceremony in the Amazon jungle. Jonathan Budd, I got the pleasure of meeting him at the convention in San Diego. So yeah, leading heart-based, and we do breath work, ice baths, team, what you saw us doing outside, the gym bunch, energy balancing, and all of these mindful practices. I had to pinch myself when I first joined Power because I just had never experienced that type of consciousness before in a big, big corporation before. So, yeah, that's.
I just want to add a little bit on the trends. Both Davis and I have school bus tiny houses, and one of our trends for sure that I've noticed is like people going tiny and living in like vans and off-grid living. So, Power also helps with like the ability to kind of create setups like for your own personal van and kind of create these little systems that are really useful and good for general regeneration of your own power and what you're consuming, and learning about like your electric system and all that, as well as what I really appreciate about Power is like the entrepreneurial like kickstart and jumpstart that it gives you. It's like a lot of the ambassadors that work with us are also like their own business owners, because they're out there talking to homeowners, they're out there talking and connecting with people, which is regenerative as they are, continuing to weave people into the system and invite them to kind of level up and think about their energy consumption and how they can also like utilize their network to kind of help support themselves, and through that then, just generally support the earth.
Awesome. Definitely this trend of conscious business, conscious entrepreneurship is so hot right now as regeneration is trickling out into what we might call the mainstream. So that's conscious business. Let's talk about conscious living really quick. I want a short statement from you guys because I know Davis lives in community in Guatemala. I'm not sure if you live there too.
I'm in Atlanta, Georgia right now.
Yo.
Yep.
So just quick statements about, how you personally choose to live regeneratively in your own lifestyle.
Yeah, great question. Since we're talking about vans, during college I basically turned my family minivan into a house, and then I upgraded to a bus, and I put solar on that bus, and I have a battery as well. I drove that from New York basically to Guatemala, which is where it is now. And so once I realized where our resources are being spent and invested, I didn't want to keep wasting money on rent, and wanted to invest in something to actually support me in my life. But yeah, we try to forage as much food as possible. We try to eat something wild every day, and growing our own food is super important. Getting water from creeks. There's findaspring.net. You can look up where fresh water is around. Reusing things, upcycling things, trying not to buy single-waste plastics, composting. Today Dylan literally took out oranges from the trash can and took them outside at the luxury condo that we were staying, and dug up the plant to put the orange peels under the dirt. That's just one simple act that shows how passionate we are about actually walking the talk.
Yeah, and just to add on that, one of our mentors, Eric Joseph Lewis, has taught us eat something wild every day. Incredible. Another one I love that he shares is each one teach 10, and we need to jumpstart that a little bit more, and each one teach 100, where each one of us needs to teach at least 100 people a year about plant knowledge, about earth skills, so that we can continue this viral spread of plant knowledge that is really important for regeneration. So everything from guerrilla composting, guerrilla food forest planting, to chipdrop.com, getting front lawns to be gardens instead of just lawns, walking barefoot. There's a number of different regenerative and healthy living little things that we do that inspire people every day, and we hear it a lot from our friends that these little things that are just not the norm are things literally digging up little planters to put your food scraps. When you're out and about and doing whatever you can to get that organic matter out of the waste stream into the earth, it's just super important to us. And we'll do whatever we can to inspire people to live more sustainably and regeneratively.
Yeah, you guys talk about it so modestly, but I know for a fact your work is pretty epic. So thanks for being here, and thanks for embodying this earth care.
This is our logo, so I thought it was appropriate to wear today. Yeah.
Yes, MetaCreative, and then Power. Thank you so much for being an amazing sponsor of this event. RegenWeek.
Thank you.
Welcome back to day 4 of Regen Week interviews. I'm here with Mark Chassan, a double CEO of both Transformative Inc. and All Global, and we're going to dig into some themes of regeneration, his work, and his impact. So, Mark, I would love for you to tell us about Transformative Inc. Just dive right in.
Be happy to. So Transformative Inc. is really set up to help eco-social and regenerative entrepreneurs obtain the resources they need to succeed. That may include capital, human resources, technology, or market resources. And I really help mentor the entrepreneurs because so many of the new innovations that change our world, and Lord knows we need a lot of change, really come from entrepreneurs and come from this innovation. Now, we know that technology can be a two-edged sword. It's kind of like a battery. You could put it into a ticking time bomb and let something explode, or a flashlight to illuminate your way. I focus on living systems innovation and those entrepreneurs that are dedicated to really creating thriving in our world.
Mm-hmm. What kind of trends do you see regeneration being expressed in entrepreneurship?
I mean, look, we all need clean air, nutritious food, water, and the gating factor for quality of life in a modern society is energy. And so I really find that we can look at the biomimetic principles, or bio meaning life, mimetic meaning mimicry, and see what the earth has done with its 4.5 billion years of ecosystemic wisdom. We may not ever fully understand it, but we can look at it, we can imitate it, and we can utilize it to create these systems that don't create the pollution and waste and extraction that have led to so many of the existential crises that we're facing now.
I love Janine Benyus's science of biomimicry.
Yes.
So maybe a better way to phrase this question would even be, what would biomimetic entrepreneurship look like?
Well, I think that when you look at regeneratability, let's just first describe that. Regeneratability is really a whole systems approach that incorporates living systems, principles, design, and approaches that continually add value to a system, promoting such things as new life, energy, vitality, renewal, and resilience in a way that increases abundance and thriving. Mm-hmm. And so if we look at the idea of regeneratability and we try to, in our lives, look at how the earth and nature solves problems and actually goes about creating its own value in its ecosystems, then I think we can apply those same principles into entrepreneurship. Not only are we using living systems innovation and technologies as entrepreneurs, but that we're really focused on creating planetary, social, and personal thriving as well. And so I think the difference between an entrepreneur and a regenerative entrepreneur or a biomimetic entrepreneur is that a regenerative or biomimetic entrepreneur is really going to be looking at how living systems work and define those solutions that are highly efficient. The other thing that I also really try to mentor my entrepreneurs to do is to use affirmative language rather than the double negative language. Mm-hmm. So often we have this war against that, or the fight against this, or the eradication of that. And rather, how can we create something good rather than fight against the bad? Mm-hmm. And what I find is your mind changes solutions. Like if we said, okay, let's end poverty. It's like, okay, but how do we create abundance? Mm-hmm. You know, how do we create that wealth for all people on the planet by using the natural abundance of the planet and its ability to regenerate? So that's one way you could look at, how do we grow food for everybody? How do we create a supply chain where we're not wasting 50% of the food that we do create? And then if you take regeneratability into business, it would be like, well, how do I, as as an entrepreneur, as a mentor, as an investor, help these eco-social and regenerative entrepreneurs to learn a skill set that it isn't where they're hoarding and keeping the information and competing. They're creating new markets. They're sharing their wisdom. They're sharing their knowledge. And I think that is also regenerative, is how can you expand and bring more people into that level of abundance and thriving, whether it be from a personal level or an economic level or in their relationships, and to see the world through a different lens, not one of, oh, I've got to fight and I've got to compete and I've got to be in poverty and I got to work hard, but how can I actually create regeneratability in my business so that it scales and expands and it creates wealth for an abundance of people?
Yeah, I think these principles are highly applicable in the world of business, in the world of finance, and in these entrepreneurial pursuits. I'm curious if there was, for you, and I may be making an assumption as coming from a traditional business background, was there a light bulb moment, or was there a journey towards understanding the significance, importance of regeneration?
Well, sometimes we have to go back to that point of initiation, and I was actually 5 years old at the time, and my parents took me to the tide pools at Abalone Cove, which is just the south part of Los Angeles on the coast. And the tide pools were just beautiful, teeming with life. In fact, I've been all over the world, Barrier Reef, Fiji, Tahiti. I've never seen tide pools that were this rich with life. And that was about 5 years old. And by the time I was 13, because of oil and sewage just being dumped into Santa Monica Bay, there wasn't a single living thing left in the tide pools. And growing up in Los Angeles with the smog and the destruction of nature and it was just so easy to see the callousness of humankind and the destruction of nature. And man, it hurt. I was a very empathic young man, and to see the beauty and the magic being destroyed, hurt me, but I didn't really know what to do with it until later in life. And so I went through a journey of being a professional musician and studio drummer. I have an intuitive gift for healing, so I worked mostly on my right lobe. And then later, when my love of music and healing was exceeded by my dislike of poverty, I became a lawyer. And, it was kind of a flip, but, definitely, worked on the left lobe. And then I brought that music and business together into a company called eMusic, which was the first company to sell digital music files online. And I took it public, and I learned a lot about the equity markets. And then IBM asked me to run digital media for them, got some corporate chops, and then really was in a position where I said, okay, what can I do to really transform the world? And as I said earlier, to me, the gating factor for quality of life in modern society is energy. But if we're burning fossil fuels for energy and we're destroying our planet through extraction and through emissions and greenhouse gases, we need to change our energy portfolio. And so I really focused on renewable and clean energy projects and helped stand up one of the top PACE, or property assessed clean energy bond companies. Learned a lot about public-private finance and bonds and indentures. And while there, acting as general counsel and VP of Biz Dev, I helped raise $10 million in operating financing, bring $100 million of warehouse lines, and orchestrated $210 million securitization of our portfolio. So I learned a lot about how we can use this public-private partnership and to bring in capital that is really, we got a Standard & Poor's AAA rating. So, how do you bring capital in that's safe, that's generating better than market rate returns? And so the thing that I see a lot of times is you have these really beautiful, empathic, heart-based people, these visionaries that you can't execute or can't find the money, and that you have investors that are reluctant to go out of, oil and tech and, the big, Fortune 500 companies. And, it's almost like you have to really find the way to execute in a very grounded way and think about what investors want. So that investors say, oh, well, here's an opportunity to earn just as much money in a regenerative investment as I would earn in, say, a more traditional investment that is extractive and destructive. And wow, on top of it, and usually investors make decisions on what kind of returns can I get, and then it's like the legacy on top of that. But there are some investors now who are looking at how can I really create impact, and that I'm willing to wait a little longer, take a little bit more risk, and do something that really transforms the world. And those investors are rare, I will say, and most of the big money is coming from the BlackRocks and Vanguards. But at least Larry Fink, which he's the CEO of BlackRock, and they're managing about $9 trillion in assets. And so he wrote a letter in 2020 to the CEOs of the companies they invest in. And he basically said, if you don't have a good ESG or environmental social governance plan that you're actually going to stick to, and if you aren't going to be involved in how to reduce climate change and greenhouse gas emissions, we'll start divesting ourselves of your stock. That scares CEOs. And I mean, that was a pretty pivotal point where one of the largest investors in the world is actually saying we want ESG and climate conscious companies.
Wow. Yes. So I don't know if anyone saw, but Mark had me tearing up when he was talking about the tide pools. And, obviously he has so many distinguished accomplishments under his belt. I really want to hear, knowing your expertise and background in investment and understanding these trends, because our work overlaps, and I'm really fascinated in societal redesign through creating regenerative communities, cities, village scale, communities, and where we can embody these principles at an experimental level. And one of the things that is tasked with us, and this can transition into awe, is to transition the world and transition traditional investment avenues and have them turn towards that and understand the value and the triple bottom line. So why don't you tell the camera what AWE stands for?
AWE stands for abundance, wellness, and empowerment. And AWE is really devoted to creating new environments that really connect us more deeply to each other and the planet. In fact, when you unpack pretty much all social dysfunction down to its root causes, it comes down to fear and disconnection. So the antidote for that, simple but not easy, is love and connect more deeply. And yet we live in an environment which is so competitive and based on scarcity. And so many people have bought into this idea of scarcity and money and exclusivity, and I'm going to work hard to try and get my little piece of the pie rather than creating an abundant pie. And if we can change the way we live, work, learn, play, and consume by building these environments that really do connect us more deeply to each other and the planet, where we can love each other more deeply, and that there is an abundance consciousness rather than a scarcity consciousness, I truly believe we can make big changes in the world.
And how can we do that specifically through communities?
Well, I think it was Thich Nhat Hanh that said, the next Buddha is likely to be a community, not a man. And my sense is that when people ask me what is the biggest challenge you have with communities, people,
Always, always.
And you know, there are a lot of people that, we're loving and conscious and we'll just sit in a circle and unanimously decide, and they really don't do good principles and agreements and understand their behaviors. And it's so important to really have people understand principles, behaviors, agreements, and have conflict resolution in place, but also to have a way for people to do the inner work. I mean, we really need to make a change from the inside out, ground up, and top down. And so communities, like, I know I'm running out of time, but just there was something called the rat farm experiment that Stanford did. And they took these rats and they isolated them, put them in little cages by themselves, and gave them a cocaine drip and water. And they all became addicted to the cocaine. And then when they put them in an environment with lots of things to do and other rats, they all stopped going to the cocaine drip. And I mean, there's a prison experiment. And it just shows that our environment is the greatest influence on our abilities, our behaviors, and the way that we see the world and relate to each other.
I would love then like a quick short statement about what your work with awe, how that might benefit others, and also how might this work be supported.
So I found that whenever we are doing real estate investment, it's very capital intensive. It is fraught with risk, and you have to have a team, one that is local, that understands the local culture, especially if you're going outside of the US, that you have to have investors that are willing to take that risk, but they tend to see it more as a real estate play and then an operations play. I'm really trying to create a hybridization of those two so that people living in the community are vested in the community businesses as well. And eventually the homeowners association fees go away and that people are getting paid to live there. But it's really about finding the right land, the right environment, and having the right, the right infrastructure and the space for people to really have options to get along. You don't want the meditators shushing the drum circle, for example. You know, you don't want the vegans saying, I smell bacon from the omnivores, and so really, careful design, regenerative design, looking at the patterns on the land and how we can, live consciously within nature, with the flora and fauna of nature, that we can create that abundance together, and then having all of those structures, the social structures in place and the economic structures in place to be able to truly develop a community, a regenerative community that is a beacon of light for humankind to say, wow, this can be done.
This can be done. I believe it.
And it must be done.
And it must be done. More importantly, we're so thrilled to have had Mark Chassan here for RegenWeek, and we know he has much more to say, and I'm going to continue chatting with him. But that's all for the interview today.
And we also have the 1 o'clock on regenerative entrepreneurship that I'm doing.
Oh. So sad for the people who aren't here at RegenWeek. They're missing out. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Nicole. Really appreciate you.
Of course, I appreciate you, Mark.
Thank you so much.
Well, this is day 4 of Regen Week interviews, and I am over the moon to be here today with Joe McVean from New Earth Development. We are going to dig into how this incredible regenerative real estate development company is transforming regenerative community creation. So I'm super excited. I want to kind of skip some of the basic questions because, of course, I want to know what regeneration means to you. I want to know how that manifests in your work. So let's start there. Like, definition of regeneration for you and then how you bring that forth in the work that you do.
Thank you, Nicole. I appreciate you having us here and for the opportunity to share my heart a little bit more. This is just such a beautiful thing, Regen Week. Everybody coming together and here in Tulum to be the voice of the movement, because we need a lot of voices starting to tell a new story in the world. For me, regeneration, gosh, it goes so deep. And to have 15 minutes to describe it, just couldn't do it. But I think there is a regenerative lens to look at every single aspect of life. And I think essentially it boils down to, how do I leave it way better than I found it? And do it in a way where I'm conscious of any potential negative externalities that could happen in the process of achieving whatever result I was looking for in the first place. So for me, I come from 8 years of marketing and digital marketing and storytelling and business development. And I like to really look at the lens of business as, how do we do this in a way where everybody is left better than we found the system that we're working in. And a lot of the times, traditionally, business has been looked at only the two people making a transaction. How do they win? If it's not a rip-off transaction. And sometimes, every time, there's an opportunity to look at the bigger picture of all of humanity. And actually, the moment that I think I started to get the seed planted of what regeneration was I was in college living with 7 other guys in a single house. And I realized that if I handled the kitchen in a way that if I multiplied my efforts by 7, the house didn't work, then I needed to shift my behavior. And I think regeneration is just looking at that lens that, like, if I, throw away my compost instead of putting it in nature, if everybody did that, well, there's a measurable methane emission that happens. And that's just one little example, but every single corner of our life, there's an opportunity to really drop in and ask ourselves, how could I do this in a way where, according to the law of 8 billion, if 8 billion of me did it the same way, would we still have a planet to live on? And very often the answer to that is sobering, because the way that we have done everything on this planet for the last at least 12,000 years is quite unsustainable. And not everything, but most things. And so, yeah, it's not only my calling and my deepest joy and purpose to try to live my life in a way where, if the next generation improved slightly upon it, then we're on a trajectory towards a world that works for everybody. But it's the more I do the shadow work and really explore who I am and what matters to me and what actually brings joy for me and everybody that I collaborate with and talk to, it's actually the only thing I can do that really brings real fulfillment and doesn't ultimately lead to miserable burnout, is finding out how I can give my deepest gifts in service to whatever system of human progress I'm focused on, and just do that to the best of my ability. So.
I share these beliefs about the world, and I really want to know more about the specifics of your work, because everybody wants to build regenerative communities, those that understand the potential it has to be a vehicle for regeneration at local scale. And so you guys represent a very sought after piece of the puzzle, right? Coming from a world where we need finance, we need business savvy, we need certain skill sets to empower the creation of regenerative communities and enrich the design so that they're stable long term. That is a piece that you guys are holding. So talk about that piece.
Yeah, beautiful. It started just based on Kelly, my fiance, and my desire to create a community where we wanted to raise children. We fell madly in love with each other. We recognized we had a shared vision and mission to create a world where everybody's free to live their purpose. And we set about to find a community in the world where we would want to raise children to create our mission in the world and just make a better world somehow through any of the businesses or creative endeavors that we had. And we looked and we looked and we looked. Kelly visited over 60 communities. I think I joined for 20 of those different communities and retreat centers and regenerative villages, interviews and location pathfinding projects, and really didn't find anywhere that resonated with us. And I think a lot of people in this movement are doing the same thing, traveling around, looking around, researching around, and they're like, oh, this one's got this, but it doesn't have that, and we want to create this. And so ultimately we're like, well, let's go do it ourselves, let's create what we're envisioning. And so we put together the financials, the business plan, the pitch deck, and everything based on Kelly's deep background of real estate and finance modeling, and put together a presentation plan. We're like, okay, let's go just raise the funding. And it ended up being a much longer process than we anticipated. Like a lot of people recognize in this movement that everything we imagine takes a lot more time to execute than it does to vision. And however, in the process, we really, really learned how to master the process of turning a vision into an executable plan that checks the boxes of what an institutional capital wants to invest into. Mm-hmm. And that was proven to us when we were pre-approved for $26 million to buy land and develop it in Costa Rica. And so as soon as we got pre-approved for that $26 million, and that was a debt offering, but there's also equity investors that are interested in what we're doing too, we recognized that we had established a process of turning this concept, this vision, into a series of documents, essentially. Mm-hmm. The financial model, business plan, pitch deck, and email one-pager that, when put together the right way, simply checks the boxes for the gateholders of huge capital in the world to say, yes, this looks like what we're looking to deploy ESG money into, environmental social governance money into.
I love your investor voice.
Yeah, I mean, they're all actually mostly wonderful people, but they're thought of from this perspective of us hippies in the jungle, like, oh, these people on Wall Street that don't care about the world. They do care about the world, but they also care about their job, and they lose their job if they deploy capital into a project that loses their money. So we need to check those boxes and demonstrate our executional proficiency. Mm-hmm. And so, we're like, okay, well, we could teach this process to anybody. We've helped over 16 projects now to go through the process of pre-development planning and some project management post-funding as well. But, ultimately we decided to productize that offer a little bit more so that we could help more people, drop the cost of how it works for us to offer it, created a program around it, and then an automated webinar funnel that provides that program. And now we have a masterclass that anybody can watch online at any time in the world and really for free get a solid understanding of these 5 elements to planning and funding a regenerative land project, which I don't even know, over 1,000 people have taken that masterclass now, which is really special. And yeah, thank you. And so it's wonderful, because for me, this is a passion of mine, because I'm really in the seat of just being a voice to what my fiance Kelly, her dream and her vision was. That it took us 2 years of our relationship for her to tell me this vision and what regenerative development was and everything was, for me to even conceptualize what it was. It wasn't until the pandemic slammed me to a halt that I recognized that, like, oh, okay, maybe just helping the internet get more purpose-driven and inspiring, which is what I was doing essentially through digital marketing, won't be the way that we solve humanity's problems, because at the end of the day, everybody closes their laptop and they're still in a dysfunctional society. So changing the roots of what civilization is the most effective way to actually create a world where everyone's free to live their purpose. So about 4 years ago now, we joined forces. I took a co-founder role to really amplify her genius, systematize our processes, and productize her genius. And we've got almost 40 land projects in the program now who are learning how to position their vision into all of these executable plans. A couple of those are really, really close to getting funded, which is really exciting. And we just take another step each day and try to remember that the joy is in the process. And not all of us may actually never live to see the world that we visualize, but that's maybe not the point. We're just here to serve as best we can, one step at a time.
Well said. So actually, the community that he briefly mentioned in Costa Rica is called Abundancia, and it's being incubated by Kelly and Joe. And I'm curious, what can other people who are wanting to create regenerative community learn from your process, potentially your successes or your failures, or what phase of regenerative community development you're in right now?
Oh my goodness, that's a really great question. we have, that's a, let me just really, really ponder that. There's a number of things. It's not that there's nothing to be learned. There's so many things, and I'm trying to think of what would be the one thing I could share with enough time that we have left. I think it's really, really deeply finding humility in the process, because as soon as you get this vision, you think that you have all the answers. And or maybe you don't think you have all the answers, but you think that you definitely will overcome every roadblock along the way, and you will. But what we've had to learn is a massive amount of humility, that how it will show up is likely different than how we thought. And where it will show up may be different than how we thought. And who it will show up with may be different than how we thought. And the process has sobered us and made us humbled us into recognizing that, you know, it's not our idea to create this. It's a prophecy happening through us. And that I think is the most important thing, is just to remember, like, when it gets hard and it gets confusing and you don't know how to do 17 things that are right in front of you that need to be done on a timeline, that there is help out there. What you seek is seeking you. And there's hope because it's a vision that was given to you, and it's not, you know, your idea that you're doing just for yourself. So the more you can get your needing to do it for yourself on your timeline, the way you think, out of the way, the more you can be in service to the energy of infinite abundance, love, and joy that was what asked you to go on the journey in the first place. And just be patient, and definitely remember your spiritual practices and your morning practices and your work along the way, so that you can find joy and fulfillment and ease in the process of all of the deep businessy, heavy, operation-y, you know, things that you're going to need to handle. Because although we're creating a world where, you know, everybody runs around in nature naked all day, you know, like, the process is very, very using the tools of the old system. So we can humble ourselves and just have the patience to learn the details of the old system, collaborate with those who have other pieces we don't, and ultimately just trust.
Yeah, I believe what you said to be true and relevant to all people building community. I wonder if you'll gift us with like a one-sentence summary of where New Earth development is headed.
Oh, revolutionizing real estate development.
Yes.
Entirely, yeah.
Excellent.
And not just those who share this vision, but Trojan horsing those who just want to create a development with a bottom line by creating a software that makes them makes it incredibly easier for them to visualize all of their presentation, business plan, and financial model by filling out one page of inputs and having our AI and algorithms and everything fill out their entire investor stack. But bake in all of these, hey, regenerative solution here would make your bottom line better there. Hey, here, you know, that's all of the different ways that doing things in a way that the vision of the world perfected is actually at the core of why you're doing it. It turns out that when you do it that way, it actually helps all of the traditional bottom lines of, you know, project sellability and operational costs, and, you know, the list goes on, and fulfillment of people living there, and you know, occupancy rates and all of these things that are on the bottom line for those developers. So where we're headed is really looking at a very Trojan horse approach, I guess. Like, of course, we're here to serve everybody who already has been in the ayahuasca ceremonies and gotten the vision that we all need to live in harmony with nature and each other and ourselves. But yeah, really inspiring a new generation of developers with the tools to do it a different way.
Excellent. There you have it, Kelly and Joe incepting the traditional finance world with these really hard skills of business, finance, and real estate development with regenerative principles. So thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Nicole.
We are at RegenWeek, and you should feel bad because you're missing out, because we are super lucky to be here with Kelly Kresick, also known as the genius behind the machine. She is co-founder of New Earth Development, and we are going to explore themes of regeneration, her work, and her major contribution to the regenerative community development movement. All right, let's get started. Why don't we unpack what regeneration means to you personally?
Yeah, it's actually amazing that you brought that up in the midst of being in Tulum, especially because, you know, there's this theme of being eco-friendly, and really it's just people kind of putting plants up and, you know, some little bit of bamboo here and there as a veneer or something. Yeah. And so you know, it's been a whole journey, a process of me understanding what regeneration truly is, and starting out with kind of this whole concept of sustainable development and how we can be more sustainable. And what I found was sustainable is actually just to be maintained at the certain rate or level that it already is. Like self-sustaining, which is important, but when our planet has been getting, you know, so bad with climate change and species extinction, environmental destruction, and so many more issues that we know that we all have, pollution and all the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, what we need to do now is build in a way that actually regenerates the planet. So one of the things in building in Tulum specifically is, you know, you have to, in order to build anything here, you have to like cut down trees, you have to destroy jungle, and so that's really like a hard thing, seeing places like this be developed that, you know, we're pushing out the biodiversity and jaguars and things like that. But that's why we decided to be in Costa Rica, because there's already previously degraded land, such as cattle farming, rice farming, things like that, that they've already kind of, you know, cut down the forest. So now we can take it over as ecological developers and actually regenerate it by planting trees, improving the biodiversity of the area by creating water retentive landscape design. So we actually bring more water back even in the dry season. So it's all about, regeneration is really adding more resources rather than, you know, degenerative construction that's typical, that takes away resources or makes things worse. You know, green is maybe a little bit better, sustainable is maintaining a certain rate, and then restorative and regenerative is where you're actually creating the living systems design and adding more resources, more water, generating more energy, like net positive energy. Improving the biodiversity of the area, including the community, improving the surrounding community, creating more food abundance, or however you're contributing and paying back to the community. So that's what I see as regenerative.
Thank you for being aware and being in integrity of these things of greenwashing, regen washing, and approaching ecological development with this integrity. So why don't we drop in there? Around how can people maybe learn from you guys at New Earth Development being this regenerative real estate development company?
Yeah, absolutely. So how do we use regenerative construction methods within what we do, correct? So there's many ways that you can do that, and that's being really careful with the building materials that you're using. So concrete, you know, is off-gassing, and a lot of people just they think that's the only option. But there's so many other options. I mean, we have a database of, you know, almost 100 different building material types, and one of them is like rammed earth, for example. You can use earth from the ground and pack it to create thermal insulation in the building. It can last much longer than concrete. It's much stronger and much better for you because it doesn't off-gas and it's all natural. Things like hempcrete, or if you don't have hemp, sugarcane crete, which we use in Costa Rica, because they're just getting rid of the sugarcane, you know, leftovers. And so you can actually mix that with limestone and it can last much longer. And so that actually sequesters carbon over time. So you actually are not only sequestering the carbon by growing, the hemp or the sugarcane or whatnot, but also over time as the building dries, which is over many, many years, it just gets harder and harder. It actually sequesters carbon. And then, of course, using all different energy systems like solar, wind, hydro. There's now hydrogen out there, which is going to be a really big thing for the future. And then water systems using simple things that you can easily replace, like gray water. Instead of just typical plumbing, you just reroute the gray water and you create filtration methods so it can go back into the land and have irrigation, or black water systems like biodigesters that actually create nutrient-dense soil, or they can even create electricity for the homes. So there's a lot of different really great techniques that even if you're just remodeling a house, you can sometimes implement some of these methods, and of course growing your own food, so you can truly be self-sufficient in that way. So the goal is to get to be 100% energy efficient, water efficient, food self-sufficient. I mean, 100% food self-sufficient is hard these days, but as high as you can go, because you never know what's going to happen in the world, but we don't want to have to be relying on, the government or even stores or things like that when our food can grow right out of the ground and it's so much healthier for us. So just implementing these small things can lead to big changes.
Yes, we want all of them. And just to clarify, these practices, these regenerative building techniques and everything that Kelly mentioned is not necessarily what New Earth Development does, but they can mobilize their directory of people who specialize in these things in order to serve people who are wanting to build a regenerative community. So talk about that. Talk about your services. Talk about this really unique offering that you guys have around, financial planning and businesses and marketing savvy.
Yeah, so a lot of times we've helped a lot of projects in the pre-development planning stage. So creating vision and mission clarity, leading to the project scope, and helping define that scope, putting that into the financial models so that there's a real execution plan that can be followed. And then being able to have that execution plan go into like the master planning of the whole project, integrating biophilic design and passive design, sacred geometry, architecture, all of those things within the master planning part. Choosing the right people, like you had mentioned, we have 600 different companies that we have in our database that are different regenerative systems or building materials or experts in different areas, and being able to bring them into the projects, for whichever materials or systems are right for that particular project. So we'll source that, and then being able to actually implement it by going and doing project management. So our company sort of plays that role in being able to help facilitate all of those different pieces. So we have our regenerative development strategists, our environmental engineers, and consultants, regenerative systems consultants. We're also certified in the Living Building Challenge. If anybody's familiar with the Living Future Institute, it's one of the top regenerative certifications in the world that also includes not only the systems, but health and happiness and social equity and ecology of place and all these different pieces that are important to play a role in these large projects. So we'll help with, everything from being able to get those certifications to project management to just, planning how are we even going to start. So we like to help people at every stage of the process because we see, people have this vision, and we see that it's so important to be able to create a new civilization for us all to be able to do it together. And we each play our roles. We each have like different, unique, creative ways that we want to build these communities, and we need to see as many of these pop up as we can. And we know we couldn't do it alone, so that's why we created New Earth Development to be not only a service providing company, but also education company, and that's where our online program comes into play, because we see people with this idea and we're like, okay, well, here's all the tools and resources to be able to do that. And within that program, We help people with the business planning, the pitch deck design, the financial model templates, the understanding what legal entities to choose for their project, what funding mechanisms and strategies to have for their project. So then that could give them a really good start to be able to have everything they need to be able to actually get their project funded and get into all the next steps.
Yes, so this is so much of what we need. My work is in regenerative community design as well, and I know we need to see more of these, and resources or lack of professionalism, it shouldn't be a barrier. And I think that's something that you help people solve. So just for reference, right, New Earth Development I see as has these 3 pillars where you have, they're designing their own regenerative community in Costa Rica called Abundancia. They have the online education piece where they're teaching people these introductory skills. And then you're also, coaching people personally through your services. And then you're building a fund that is a portfolio of the most promising projects, helping these really high potential projects get to a level where they can be ready to receive real serious funding to get off the ground, which is what we need. We need to infuse the capital so that more regenerative communities are able to establish, reach maturity, and provide a long-term regenerative lifestyle to the people actually living inside of these communities. So those 3 pieces, how do you see them working together, and what are you most excited about? How do you even juggle all of them?
Yeah, I mean, we've had to put it all together for our own project. So that's the reason we're like, okay, well, we've done it, so now we want to share that with others. So, first step is the online program, which is the pre-development planning, whether that's services or the online program, whatever people can do. And then the raising funding piece, we have investors that we can connect people with depending on what their project type is, what kind of funding they're looking for, those sorts of things. So we try to help within that facilitation as well. And then execution, once the funding comes in. And yeah, normally it's such a long process even getting to the point where you're ready to raise funding because there's so much details that go into it all. And a lot of people want something really fast, like, oh, just what can I do within, a couple weeks to a month to get everything ready to be funded. And oftentimes, it doesn't. Yeah, you can get some things, but it's not going to be like the actual numbers. It takes months to be able to go and get quotes and make sure you find the right land. So some people already have land. Some people need to actually find the land that works for their specific vision, and that can be a couple year process just in itself without even the purchasing part and the due diligence that's needed to be done. So it's definitely, anybody that's looking to get into this, it's a long-term game, and it's 1,000% worth it because we all know what we're doing this for. But just to, be patient in that process and know that there's steps and things that need to happen before you can fully get funded and go forward with the project. So
totally, and that's the regenerative mindset where you have to kind of learn to slow down and work at the pace of nature, because when you rush, that's typically when you destroy things or make mistakes. So definitely a piece that everyone building a regenerative community should consider. So I actually recently featured you guys in an article in the trending publication. I called it like my Rolodex of village design consultants, because I don't think you get more niche than being the consulting on financial planning for regenerative community development. It's that early a stage of this field, of this sector, which is so cool to see. So I kind of, I really want to see, I want to know, like, as you're working with projects, you have these tools, like you offer a really in-depth P&L sheet to people to figure out, their whole profit and loss assessment and all these really intricate financial tools. What would you say is the most important tool that you guys offer, or what tool has the most impact when you're working with people?
Yeah, I do think the financial model is probably one of the most important, because I've seen so many projects struggle financially. And
Too many.
Yeah, and and everybody gets into this with like a beautiful passion and heart, and all right, let's just build it together and it will happen. But like, it's really important to get everything planned out on paper, make sure the financials work, make sure you do have the financial backing that you need. And I'm not saying that don't get started with something. Like, yes, of course, take little action steps that you can, but make sure you have all your planning done first. And so that financial model, we've worked for so long, just getting it all dialed in to include all the regenerative pieces as well as all the regular real estate development pieces. And so you could scale that to do just a small homestead all the way up to a big city if you wanted to. But it takes time to go through every single item and just make sure that you know what you're getting into, and you know all the pieces and all the people that will play a role in it before you get into it. So, yeah.
Well, certainly we deeply appreciate you bringing your expertise in this area to regenerative community development. We need it. And so, yeah, thank you for being involved in this movement, for helping projects, and I'm super excited to have you here. Do you have anything like a statement that really kind of sums up what phase you're at and maybe actually in community development, developing your own community for your future children?
Yeah, thanks. It's my honor to be able to bring this information to people. It's amazing to see such a strong movement in this arena. And yeah, where we're at with our project is we're currently in contract for a smaller piece of land in Costa Rica, as well as looking at other larger pieces for the showcasing of, a regenerative event center, healing center, retreat center for people to all come together and see, like, what is regenerative development? See a physical showcase of all these different global solutions that we have. So we're really creating that hub currently. So if anybody wants to play a part in that together, let us know in Costa Rica specifically, or if you guys want to create your own project wherever you are at in the world, definitely check out our website, newearthdevelopment.org, and hopefully we can offer as many resources as possible so that you can be a part of co-creating this new earth together.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you so much.